This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. According to CIPD data, 45% of HR professionals feel undervalued in their roles, and Deloitte found that 79% of leaders believe that their function is not seen as a strategic partner. Now, I know with the audience of this show that I'm preaching to the converted here when I say that it's a massively missed opportunity if you're not listening to your people leaders in the organization. My guest today is Kameka McLean, who is the group head of HR at Walker Crips Investment Management. And Kameka is a huge advocate for the strategic power of HR and in the need to remain strong in ourselves around the value that we can bring to the organizations and resist being silenced or overlooked. Now, I can't wait to get into this critical topic. So Kameka, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Felix. It is a good opportunity for me to be here. So thank you so much.
So I wonder if we can start with just a really high level question. In today's world, moving quickly, we've got this constantly changing mix of tech and people and transformation and geopolitical shifts. Why is HR more important than ever?
That's a very good question, Felix. So basically, before I even did attempt to answer that question, let me just say this, and probably it does answer your question, is that HR is more than just a function, right? It's the emotional backbone of an organization because we deal with so many issues. We carry the weight of others, whether they're struggling, etc. And we do this often in silence. And as you stated, you know, the workplace and organization and the economy around us and all of these things are constantly shifting. And I just think since 2020, the pressure has intensified more when it comes to conflict because they become more complex. And there is less support to deal with the shifting workforce and mechanism, you know, and there's so much to unpack. And I guess that's what we're going to be exploring as to how do we maintain being HR during all of these changes within society, and how do we stay true to our roles within organization. And I would say it's more of looking at yourself as a person who's grounded in integrity. And once you're grounded in integrity and grounded as a strategic partner, then you'll be able to manage the shift of what is coming through from a technological perspective, from an organizational perspective, from an economical perspective, from a shifting market trends and analysis, etc., etc. So hopefully that kind of answer your question.
Yeah, big answer to a big question. But yeah, no, I really like that. And I like that you went first to the point of that term, emotional backbone of an organization. I've never heard before. I think that's really powerful. But it kind of feels like as people are dealing with so much, it feels like, and this is not really a professional thing, although obviously it bleeds into it, but I feel like the people I'm surrounded by every day are feeling more emotional, more sort of almost rawer, because they're dealing with so much, because it feels like everything is so fraught. So you've got this big additional weight being put on people and therefore on HR, right at the same time where the majority of HR functions have been cut back over the last couple of years. I mean, I can't think of an HR function that isn't unbelievably lean at the moment. How do you think about how HR leaders can best play that role as the emotional backbone without getting burnt out themselves?
And that is why we're having this conversation, Felix, in all sense. At the beginning, you talk about how HR professionals feel according to studies by the CPD and Deloitte, etc. But just to further go into that, you know what you said, and I will come to your questions, but I would like to also identify that burnt out in the profession or burnt out amongst workers has risen from 52% in 2020 is reported at 52% at 2022, but that transpiring to 82% in 2024.
82%.
82%, exactly. And as you talk about the undervaluation of HR, that still remains high at 68 to 74% of HR professional feeling unseen. Having said that, I think it's very much important, no matter the challenges and no matter how lean the department is for HR professional, number one, to knowing themselves and knowing when it is too onerous or something is too big for them, and when they need to step back, because a lot of HR professional does not know when to step back, does not know when to look after their well-being, and they get caught up into so many things, and that leads to burnout. So I think that's an important point to address, that like myself, the other day when all of these challenges happened, I had family members being ill, was going through a restructuring, had the hurricane in Jamaica, and I was like, oh my God, this is just too much. And I had audits coming up and everything. It became a bit onerous to me, and with the lean infrastructure of HR and HR not really seen as value as it should be, or no one understand the intricate details that we as HR professional take on a day-to-day basis. They think it's like a cushy job, and it isn't. It is a lot of emotional toll that you have to deal with from employees. If you're going through a restructuring, of course, people is going to be upset losing their roles. Individuals that are suffering from mental health, just wanted someone to talk to. So we are always the backbone of an organization where people come to us with issues that we need to resolve, and to put burnt out and excess work on us as well, it's quite challenging. So I would say an important aspect of that is for us to actually know ourselves and know when we're on the verge of, taking on too much and being overwhelmed, and stepping back a bit and looking after our mental health. And, from a HR perspective, I would say prioritization is key. Prioritize the key important task. Right now I have about 10 things that I need to deliver, but I know that the employment law changes, the Employment Right Acts that has been amended, that is at the forefront of everything that we do, because we need to communicate those changes, and we need the business to understand how that impact their roles as manager, etc. So that would be a priority. So prioritizing your work, and also looking in advance of regulatory change, of legal updates, etc., so that you can stay at the forefront of that, instead of being proactive instead of reactive.
So it's kind of knowing what your big value drivers are going to be in the organization and prioritizing that. I think as you were talking, there's two things popped into my head. First of all, it felt like on a plane where they're like, put your own mask on before helping others. I got that flashing in my head. But then the other one was, do you think HR can kind of be, because maybe there's that feeling that they have to prove themselves, HR leaders, we have to prove ourselves as a function. We can't be a cost center. We have to be. Do you think that drives a kind of like, yes, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, okay, yeah. Like, I'll take that. Let me do that. Let me be useful. Do you think, is that something that resonates?
I would say yes. It does resonate, and not just that. Especially if you're HR that is not that is there's not a not. Especially if you're HR that is well versed in majority areas of HR. So for myself, I'm very good in all the pillars of HR. I'm very good from a regulatory perspective because of my legal degree and my ability to interpret regulations and law. So, I take on a lot of things just to add values, just to make sure organizations that I've worked for in the past does not fall foul of, regulation or scrutiny from FCAs, etc. So I do take on a lot from an HR professional, and I do know other HR professionals like, okay, yes, I do that because they see the picture. A lot of people view HR in isolation, but it cannot be viewed in isolation in the sense that HR touch every areas of the business, right? It's a holistic function across the organization. And when I say that, HR is in recruitment, is in the business strategy because it's HR centers around people and organization centers around people too. So I know a lot of organizations just focus on the clients, but without the their employees, there won't be any clients to service that business. So every organization, unless you're AI tech that you just press a button, it's about people interactions, people emotions, etc., etc. So there will always be cases where we will say, okay, we will be involved in this project because HR touch across the business, whether it be risk, compliance, operations, investments. HR touch each of those areas because of the people element of their role. So yes, we do get caught up in putting our hands up to say, oh, yes, we would do that. Yes, we would do this, and it can be overbearing and it can be too much to take on, to be honest.
So what's the secret then? While we're on this sort of topic of prioritization, you were talking and shared really transparently around the tough time that you went through. Not so I'm sorry you went through that, and I think it's something that a lot of us, maybe not as extreme and all at the same time, but a lot of us are going through in our different ways. So how do you deal with that sort of piece? What's the secret to how you prioritize?
It is not so much a secret because I've only found it out now. So until I went through it, I didn't understand it. Um, as HR professional, we want to be the face of an organization and be that person that upholds all of the organizational requirements. So whether it be I can say I've never been sick at work or I've never taken time off because I just wanted to be that person that there's nothing, their record is clean and things like that. And I'm happy to delve a little bit deeper as to how this thing can change because that's what I've always thought. I've had my children and I used to take holidays off if one of them were sick and things like that. I do prioritize my children, but I also made sure because I didn't want a microscope on my attendance and things like that. So I always uphold the policies and process of an organization. And I've been doing this for years and years and years and years. But last year, because I'm an advocate, I'm always saying to people, take time off to refresh yourself. And I realized I wasn't practicing what I was preaching,
Mm.
right? And I was taking on so much, and there was so much pressure from work. There was so many pressure from home, and with what happened in Jamaica with the hurricane, and relative became sick, and accident happened during the hurricane. People's out. My family house got destroyed. I just felt like, oh my God, I can't cope with this at this present moment. And my husband said to me, take some time off, take some time off. And I was like, oh no, I have an audit, I have this, I have that. If I do this, there's no one to take on this task. I don't want something else to come on. I've already planned my year out already. And if I take time off, um, then I won't be able to do these things. And the thing that I really should have prioritized, Felix, is my mental health well-being because I was nearing or burnout. I was burnt out. I was overwhelmed with all of the challenges that I had to endure and what had happened. And I really should have stepped back because my workplace was ready and willing for me to take time off, but I didn't want to. And I'm glad that my husband spoke to me and said, take some time off. And I spoke to the CEO, and he said to me, Kameka, I think you need to take some time off, and you need to go see your family because you're quite emotional, and things like that. And what you've been through, it, it, it is, it is a journey. So by all means, take some time off. And I did that. I prioritized my mental health well-being for the first time in my life, even though I'm an advocate for that, for everybody to do it. I never did it. And that was the best thing I ever could have done for myself, because, I took a couple of weeks off. I went to see my family, and they were fine, and I did as much as I could for them, and everything, and I just felt loved, and I felt appreciated, and I realized that I'm not alone on this journey, and a lot of people feel the same way. I shared my story on LinkedIn, and I got so much private messages to say, "Oh my God, I've gone through the same thing." I'm happy that you can say that you've taken time off as an HR professional, and that's what we should prioritize, knowing our limits, knowing when we're near enough burnt out, and prioritizing a mental health well-being. And I know that's not really the question that you kind of asked, but for me, in that point in time, that was my priority. Work has to stop, and for me to just take a break from it so that I can be my best self when I come back to work. And when I came back, I was so much more energized. I was so much more refreshed. I reassessed the project that I was doing and created different work stream. Look at what other individual were doing in the business, and trying to use some of that work that's already been taking place to look at succession planning and all those things, and looking at regulatory changes. And that really helped, to be honest. It gave me time to pause. It gave me time to come back afresh, and to review my plans as to what was priorities, and what should take precedence in the next few months. And I think that was a good thing to do, to be honest.
No, it really resonates. And thanks for sharing. And I'm sure a lot of people listening will really sort of empathize and recognize what you've been through in their own lives. I can think, founder burnout's a bit of a thing as well, and a lot of them wear it like a badge of honor. But I'll feel burnt out and then take a holiday and come back. I'll be like, what decisions was I making before I went? Like, what was I doing? And just the quality of work. I think, did you find that you said already that you came back and you were able to do things better, but what always strikes me is the huge difference in our brain power between being exhausted and overwhelmed, and then being well rested with the space to think. It's just crazy, isn't it?
Exactly. It's amazing, because I didn't realize that I was just burning the candle at both ends. When I look at my message, because you always have, how are you doing? Good morning. It was just straight to the point. And I was like, oh wow, that's not me.
Yeah.
When individual was talking to me straight to the point, not and I'm a
What do
chatty
you
person.
want?
It's like, okay, what can I do for you today now? Is there something else? I lost that empathetical approach, because I am a people's person, and I realized I was losing myself a little bit, to be honest, and I wasn't me for a minute.
I'm very glad you found yourself again, Kameka. I think it's so important. And I think, to take it, I guess, back to the bigger picture, you've got, as an HR leader, absolutely have to prioritize, making room for yourself, your own mental well-being. I think probably within that falls like your own development and how you're thinking about your role. I'd love to take us to the higher level topic, which is the fact that HR are often not feeling like they're recognized within the organization. And I think you told me a story around suggesting something in an organization and it kind of being sort of nodded off, or yeah, we'll get back to that later. And then a consultant comes in and says the exact same thing, and people are like, yeah, that definitely that definitely makes sense. And I know that that's not a unique lived experience. I've seen that in other organizations. I've seen that in my own organization. I wonder, what advice do you have for HR leaders who want to be more agentic or want to be more of a strategic driver, but maybe are worried about being seen as difficult or overly pushy or whatever it is? What advice do you have for HR leaders to be that driver in the organization, maybe if they're not used to being it historically?
I would say being grounded in integrity is a big thing, right? And you're right. A lot of HR professional has faced um, instances where they have made a recommendation and the recommendation has been overlooked because of the way the organization view HR, not being the subject matter expert on strategic direction of the business, which we are because we've been in a lot of boardrooms in other organizations to see what they've done wrong and what didn't work out. And I've led enough change and transformational program to know when an organization needs to take actions when it comes to their strategic alignment from the people practices, because I think that the business kind of overlook that people is the driver of whatever you want to achieve. So whether it is revenue or not, that you need people to be on board, right? So I will say to any HR professional who that they feel like their voice has been silenced, their recommendation has not been taken seriously, I always say I will not let my life narrow down. It's just a favorite a quote by Maya Angelou, in which it's about the way I find it work for me over the years is how I present it to the business. And MI goes a long way when you are trying to make a business case. Understand the business, understand the needs of that business, look at the MIs that you have in place that can back up what you're saying. Look at case studies because there's a lot on CIPDs. There's a lot of on other organizations as well. The big fours, they have case studies as well. So look on those and try to educate yourself as to the best way to present something to your senior leaders. Do not let, because they say no, stop you from presenting what you believe is good from a people practices, because you are the subject matter expert when it comes to people, when it comes to HR practices and what works. And us as HR, we look at the intricate details that aligns holistically across the business. So, which a lot of people just does not see that everything, like when you talk about systematic thinking, I am like that, and I've always practiced like that. You can't just fix one area of a business and it doesn't impact other areas of the business. You have to think of things systematically or holistically, if that word is better for you, in making changes and suggesting changes. And this is where project and suggestion fail. You have to review it in its entirety, every single intricate details of what you're suggesting, so that you know what you're suggesting, so that you can preempt the questions and answer and have the answers for the senior leadership team. And once they see how you work and that you have analyzed every single details, whether it be the products that they're developing, whether it's client relationship they're trying to develop in, which direction the business is moving in, just think of it from a strategic perspective and still be grounded in integrity in knowing what you believe is right. And the suggestion will be able to fill those gaps.
Yeah, and to loop it back, if you're not rested, and if your mental health's not in the right place, you're not going to be able to go through that
Exactly.
rigorous process, right?
Exactly.
And you're not going to be ready for the challenge that you get in a sort of board environment. Now that makes a ton of sense.
It the board environment. It can be quite challenging and intense. So you have to be on. I was trying to look for the word my grandmother used, but you have to be fully aware of every single thing, because you will be questioned and challenged, and you don't want to be caught on the back footing. That's what my grandmother used to say. You don't want to be caught on the back footing. So there you go.
That's absolutely right. And what better place to end than on some grandmotherly advice. Kameka, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's a really interesting conversation.
Thank you so much, Felix. It was a pleasure. Thank you.